I think it's a little bit of us walking forward. It's a little bit of them walking forward. It's because when we say advocacy, it feels like we're doing everything anti someone. And what is not popularly understood about advocacy is holding the space, championing for our own spaces, right? I think advocacy has now turned into a term where it's like you are going to fight, you're going to antagonize, and you're going to be anti everybody. And the idea of being anti everybody is what scares the funders or makes them uncomfortable. I think how we also need to understand that it's not about fighting with others, it's about fighting for our space, right? It's about letting me be in a place. It's about letting me travel. It's about letting me access a park as an equal citizen, having my educational opportunities like an equal citizen. When we present it like that, and when we also have these dialogues with funders to say that we are just doing this, if you look at it in this way, this is what we're going to do. We're going to push for change rather than antagonize for change, right? Because change cannot happen. You can't be fighting with someone and saying, now do what I want. It doesn't work like that. You have to collaborate. Everybody has to meet halfway.
Hello and welcome to the India Autism Center podcast. We are the official podcast partners of the Purple Fest Goa 2025. And I have with me today on this episode somebody who I consider a very close friend, apart from somebody who's been a renowned disability activist for decades now. Nidhi Goyal. Nidhi, I'm sorry, I just made you feel old by saying for decades, right?
Thanks, I realized that was going to be my opening line. You can say decades. It's fine, Nipun. I'm only as old as you.
Fair enough. Nidhi, I'm pretty young, so yeah. So you're young as well then.
Yes.
Nidhi, you were not born with a visual disability, but you of course gained it later in life. Could
Yeah.
you walk us through a bit of your childhood and how did the disability impact you? How did it change your life?
It changed some things about me. It didn't change many things about me. Like I was a brat even before. I'm the youngest in my family of three siblings. I was diagnosed when I was around 14, 15. Honestly, it was, one of the memories, and people say it must be a shattering moment for you to be diagnosed. And I was like, oh my God, I was more shattered that I had my history exam next day. But no, it's very interesting because when you grow up as a non-disabled child, you somehow also see disability through the worldview, right? I had the opportunity to shift that worldview, the ableist worldview a bit, because I have an elder brother who also is blind now. And he was also diagnosed. He was diagnosed much earlier in life. And so, I was in between. I was the outsider and the insider. The insider as a sibling, the outsider as a non-disabled person. And so, in this very interesting mix, I got diagnosed. And when I got diagnosed, it was for me a moment to realize that I wanted to be a portrait painter. Maybe looking back, I feel like it wouldn't have been the right choice for me. That requires immense patience, which I don't have. Fun. But that, I was working for 8 years towards that goal. And the only thing that I knew then that goal wouldn't be for me. So I think as a bubbly extrovert, full of life, some of those things never changed for me. What changed is I became a more compassionate, more sensitive, and more inclusive human being. And I think I'm glad for that.
No, I think you're definitely an extrovert even today. And that is great, I think. And people start looking at disability and thinking, ये बंदा बेचारा हो जाएगा or something, etc. Right?
बहुत
And
बेचारे लोग हैं जो ये सोचते हैं लोग ही बेचारे हैं मुझे बहुत खराब लगता है जो
but
बेचारे
did you see any change in your classmates' attitudes towards you in school, etc. at that time? Are there friends you lost because you became disabled?
I think I saw friends getting confused, Nipun, because I didn't meet with an accident. It wasn't a moment where they knew I was this and now I was not this, right? It was a transition. So when you're diagnosed with an incurable, irreversible, progressive and degenerative eye disorder, you only don't know how much you can see, right? So I would, walk on the street and the next day I remember like, one day you suddenly realize you were almost about to die because yesterday you could see the bike racing towards you and today you couldn't. Right? And so how do you explain people who are in their teenage, whose priorities are very different and who are like, oh, life is fun and cool. And you're like, yeah, it is cool. And I know it's fun, but it's also something that I'm grappling with. I think I still, because of my friends, could be a regular teenager. I still had crushes. I still bunked classes. I still did all the natak. I had a nice rose day. I had my favorite eateries. When I was learning how to do visual things while losing sight, they were like, no, but you can dress up. You will be able to apply makeup. Okay, till then we'll help you. Like pick up your accessories. Don't do this. So I think I lived a fuller life not because of the people who left me, but because of the people who held me together. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And that's not what all people with disabilities have. And I often say I'm very privileged. So people think I'm some, queen or king's child. And so,
Bani ki beti.
yeah, aisa kuch hai. So, but my privilege is, and it's a big privilege when you're disabled, right? That you have a unflinching support from your family that never questions you. Neither my brother who lives with blindness, who's A-type super achiever, my sister who's amazing doctor, my parents, nobody questioned my capability. The narrative was not, okay, what will now you do? Will you be able to do anything? The narrative was, oh, you'll do and you'll find your way. We just have to support you till you find your way. And I had some amazing friends who had the similar narrative. They didn't know what I'll become. They didn't know what my ambitions were. But with each failure, with each change of plan, with each new discovery, they just were there to say, okay, great, we're just here. And I think that makes a huge difference. And that's the privilege that I always talk about.
And what was your journey towards becoming a disability activist? Is it that you went to college, did a degree, and then thought the obvious choice now in
Must.
career is to work in disability? Or
I was like, झंडा उठा के आवाज उठाओ. नहीं. For me, I think it was when I was diagnosed, and I think I'm very sure, and I can never forget. So I'm a very I'm a believer. I'm a deeply religious person. I'm very spiritual, and I have a spiritual guru. Right? Shri Guru Dr. Balaji Tambe. And he basically, when I was diagnosed, of course, everything can't be hunky-dory, right? You go through phases of acceptance. You go through that phase of losing something that you had, right? And it can never be easy. I will be kidding if I said, oh, the transition was smooth and it was amazing. It can't be amazing, right? And so I was really upset and not happy. And I was wondering what to do because career-wise, I thought I was set back all my childhood. Like how you plan and execute, and all of those things roll back. And for me, I was sitting with my spiritual guru, and he said, "You're being very narrow in your vision. What you need to do is start looking at people around you and you will realize your privilege." So this privilege that I talk about was not something that I immediately developed. My spiritual guru said, you look around. You will realize what you have and you will realize what you need to do. And that's when I'd taken an oath that, when I slowly started seeing that I was very lucky, I was very fortunate, the situation was not the same for all people and all women with disabilities around me. I decided that I'll do something about it. Of course, at 16, I didn't know what I would do about it. So I had my entire career trajectory. I sort of dabbled into commerce. I did a part-time business administration piece. I became a journalist. So I did a mass media course, worked as a journalist. And then I was like, okay, this is not fun. I need to create impact. I need to touch the lives and I need to go back to my oaths. And that's when I moved into the development space. And once I moved into the development space after 3-4 years, it was very obvious for me saying that I have a vision. I've met the community. I am a part of the community. And I feel for the people because they are my friends, they are my colleagues, they're my community, and they're just human beings for me, full human beings. And that's how the vision of Rising Flame came into existence.
We will come to Rising Flame. But how was your experience as a blind journalist? I'm curious. I've never come across a blind journalist in India.
I did nice long feature stories. So I didn't do the street hustling stories. I was like, oh, I need to cover you. So I even then did features on women. I did features on education and career opportunities. For me, it was fine. I didn't face some of the things that we anticipate saying, if you're a blind journalist, you won't be able to hustle, you won't be able to push. I think being an extrovert, being confident is also a part of that. That you just go and you make them comfortable and they are comfortable then.
Absolutely. But I do think we need more people with disabilities in journalism and media.
Absolutely. It's one of the programs that we run at Rising Flame to increase sort of disability inclusion in media. But just overall, right, Dipun, it's not just the media. Whenever disabled people tell the story, it's the same story through a different lens. And I think that's what's important. That as a non-disabled person, I always give this example, and excuse me for that, but if a room full of men decide what a woman wants or tell a woman's story, and a woman tells her story,
it's way more authentic. Yeah,
exactly. So that's the same thing.
Around a decade back, you were also very popular in the comedy circuit in
Yeah.
India.
Thanks for saying were. That's really strange. Okay, no, yeah.
You've become a formal CEO now, running a large organization. So I guess stand-up comedy has taken a back seat, right? That's why I said war.
Yeah, no, I can tell you what happened with the stand-up comedy. So I still do comedy shows, but I do it more for private, corporate, these kind of requests. And mostly it's sort of people request more a mixed approach, which is an innovative storytelling approach. So comedy mixed with motivational talk or comedy mixed with organizational building talk. So those been those formats and private shows that I've been doing. I am not in the mainstream. If you ask me, are you at Canvas Laugh Club? I'm not at Canvas Laugh Club because also I am all over the world with Rising Flame.
No, but the reason why I asked you that question is that why did you choose comedy as a tool to create change? And
I never.
where does one draw the balance between comedy being a useful tool to create change, but comedy also going over the line with, as with Samay Rana and the controversies he's been in recently with comedy?
Go over the line again, Nipun. It's me doing the comedy, right? It's not coming from a space that we use disability as a humor. My comedy was to make a comic or make a joke on the ableism. So people always misunderstood. They were like, oh, you have a self-deprecating humor. And I was like, you just didn't get the point. I never cracked a joke on me or on blindness or on disability or on deafness. The joke was always on the people who had all of these weird assumptions, who carried these ableist stigmas. And so, in my first show, that was in Kolkata, in my debut, there was this woman who said I was rolling, I was falling off my chair, laughing so hard, but I was also cringing because I was like, oh my God, I am like this. This is what I do. I have all these ableist things that I do. And so that was the idea of the comedy. So I'm never going to be a Samay Rana or anybody else, right? It's not that disabled comedians are cracking a joke on disability or using disability for humor. There's a huge difference when women comedians come and talk about gender barriers that they face, right? That the body shaming that they face when they talk about all of that, they're not body shaming themselves. They're talking about society that body shames them. They're talking about society that's misogynist. So I think that's the difference again when a comedian cracks a joke on disability and when a disabled comedian brings life experiences forth.
So would you advise mainstream comedians also to interact more with people with disabilities before making disability sketches?
I think they
What
should
is the
just
way
go
they
and
should
make disability sketches. They just leave that. Again, it's like a man coming and talking about women's bodies, right? It's so awkward. Like, why would you do that? Right? But you can. If you deal with sensitively, you have many male comedians who've been coming and talking about honor killing and rape and things like that in a way that they can make people aware more positively. So I just want to say that it really is a sensitivity and the focus, but because we've seen disability as a subject of humor, who in the previous 30 years of Hindi cinema, if you see, I mean, I'm not even going to Hollywood. The little person was the butt of jokes. The person who stammered was the butt of jokes. The person who had a cognitive disability was the butt of jokes. Disability was a butt of jokes, right? And so perpetuating that in comedy is a problem, and which is what many people do.
completely agree. I think punching below is not really the right way to create comedy that way.
Also, we can punch hard back.
Of course. Either I've known you for a while now and I consider you a close friend, but before I knew you, there were before I knew you, I'd heard about you.
Okay.
And there were two things about you that, really stood out for me at that time. One was, of course, the stand-up comedy. I'd seen videos, I'd heard about your performances, etc. And the second was the fact that you spoke so openly about sexuality and disability.
Right.
And people with disabilities are often considered asexual beings.
Absolutely.
So how do you think can that perception change in society? And what is Rising Flame specifically doing on that?
So I have to say, share some hilarious stories around it. So I was younger than definitely what I am today, at the start of my career, right? I started working on disability, gender, and sexuality. That's how I entered into the development and disability space. I did not know, Nipun, that people had, honestly, right? So coming from a very progressive family, when I did one of my first stand-up shows in Bombay, which had everything, jokes around sexuality and disability, jokes around my own experiences, my dad was in the audience. I come from a family like that, right? Where we're progressive, we're open, we're respectful, and we're dignified. So for me, I never imagined that if I speak about sexuality, there's going to be so much of taboo and pushback on the people trying to bring these issues. And I still remember as a young activist, I heard these very interesting rumors after a while. One of them was like, I'm single, so I want sex, and that's why I'm talking about sexuality. One of them was, I only know to talk about sex. Third was, I want to bring sex into activism. And so for me, so I found it very hilarious, but it also redoubled.
So you got a backlash from within this
Community.
community.
Yes, yes. Within the
That's shocking,
disability
yeah.
community. But it was also very interesting because I redoubled my efforts, right? I realized that we know so little that we are bringing gender, sexuality, and disability and triply stigmatizing the person who wants to take this work ahead. I'm very glad to tell you that a decade and a half after we started speaking about sexuality, it's now people are writing theses on disability and sexuality. It's a topic that many PhD students are pursuing. So it's in academia, it's in conversation, it's in our movies. Where is Margarita with a straw? It's about sexuality of a young woman with a disability, right? So we don't have that many media representations as we may want, but it's out there and people have started speaking about it. But you have to understand, Nipun, we are still in a very charitable framework around disability. We were just having a funder conversation yesterday, and we brought some disabled founders and some funders together, and we said, what is still being funded is distribution of wheelchairs or distribution of canes or hearing aids, right? When we're talking about rights-based work, we're still saying that no, we don't want to fund this, right? We're still getting some of that feedback. And why I bring this is because when you think about charity and disability, you'll think about, acha, at least let us give them assistive devices. At least let us give them some education. At least let us give them some employment. So, some reservation, some employment, some secure job. Let's not talk about them being full human beings. The challenge around sexuality is that we don't want, no matter how inclusive we become. Sexuality is a part of every human experience, be it asexuality, your preferred sexuality, heterosexuality, homosexual, whatever it is, it's a part of a human experience. And we still resist people with disabilities from being full human beings. And that's the challenge that we're talking about. That challenge is still something that us as a community to take head on and say, hello, we are full human beings. We have these range of human experiences. And of course, Rising Flame works at this intersection of disability, works across disability with all persons with disabilities, but has a focus also on the intersection of gender and disability. Sexuality, you won't believe, comes up in our leadership programs, right? Because it is so linked to the sense of self. Without talking about it, without training on it, without having group dialogues and peer support, we can't move ahead and talk about confidence. We can't talk about interactions, negotiations, communications. So it is really underlying across programs. At Rising Flame, of course, the dedicated ones were the series of workshops that we launched around consent called Naam Na Hai. We are quite filmy that way. We have publications around harassment, consent, and sexuality. We have our book that we published last year with HarperCollins India, which is called And They Lived Ever After, where women with disabilities reclaimed popular fairy tales and wrote their stories through that. So in many ways, through direct work of building capacities, through storytelling, through advocacy, through work with our health professionals on reproductive health, sexual health, and so on and so forth, and through policy interventions. So very 360-degree work on sexuality, gender, and disability that Rising Flame does.
Absolutely. And I think other than Rising Flame, nobody's really taking sexuality, head on in India when it comes in the disability space. You also travel globally a lot. Do you think this is an India-specific problem? Have other countries dealt with it better?
Some countries have dealt with it better. At least they're out there. At least we're accepting their videos. At least we're okay, disabled people coming and saying we have our own sexuality, right? There are many countries who are better. There are many countries who are worse, Nipun. So sexualities are suppressed. It's a taboo. It's culturally inappropriate. Women will say, things, women's issues. We have women's issues. And I'm like, what women's issues? Economic empowerment is a woman's issue. Education can be a woman's issue. What is this women's issue? No, our kind of issues we want to talk about. And I'm like, are you saying you want to talk about reproductive health? Are you saying you want to talk about menstrual hygiene? And they'll just look at me saying, yeah, we'll talk about it later. Like, yes. But in some places you also have dating and relationships that are more open, right? I'm not saying it's easier for persons with disabilities, but at least they're seen, and visibility is the first step. Nipun. It's always, if you go out there, people are like, oh, we don't see disabled people enough, so we don't build the infrastructure. It's a similar thing in stigma and conversations that people are like, oh, we didn't know you guys get, into relationships. You all have desires, you have partners, you get, you marry, you have children. We don't know any of this. And so we need more stories, we need more awareness, we need more realities. And I tell you, Margarita with a straw solves the problem, but not really. We solve the problem when a Dilwale Dulhania, like a mainstream movie, has one of the characters who's disabled and is dancing around a tree. You think I don't dance? I mean, I had a love marriage, so I have done much more than dance.
Sure. Invisible disabilities is another thing which has been a big focus at Rising
Absolutely.
Flame. Tell us more about the work you've done on that. And
Yeah.
why do you think is the disability conversation in India today hijacked by two disabilities? The two disabilities that both of us have, visual disabilities and motor disabilities.
For me, it's also, again, it's a part of who I am. It was very strange to see that people were like, oh, but we will disregard invisible disabilities. I can tell you, my team, when I say Rising Flame is unique for me, is also because we're a self led team, right? Our leadership, our team members, our consultants, advisors, majority of them, and I always say this, live with visible and invisible disabilities, right? But it's amazing for us to see that dynamic, because often, the next in line, the leadership in our organization, the programs lead, lives with an invisible disability. And when she and I travel together, very often she's taken as my caregiver. And her access needs are not taken care of, right? I am patronized and infantilized by making her my caregiver, and her access needs are denied. So you're basically, when there is a cross disability group, you are basically stigmatizing and denying and creating barriers for each of them in unique ways. For invisible disabilities, we always need a proof. We want to ask, saying, I don't believe you have a disability. The problem starts there, where we don't believe, and it has to somehow fit in our worldview. It has to somehow fit in our understanding of what disability is. And unfortunately, the understanding of a disability is a wheelchair and a white cane, or the black glasses as well. But it's literally that. It's a symbolism that's got attached, and that's all. And of course, we're the bichara people, and everybody else is non existent. And I think that narrative is changing very slowly, much slower than we'd like it to be, by self advocates coming out. But that's also a lot of pressure, Nipun, where people are sitting and you're like, please talk about your disability. And they're not.
But I think that there has also been a lot of progress in this. Like 5 years back, we would not even be having a conversation about invisible disabilities.
I was, but yes.
I mean, in general, as a community.
As a community, yes. No, that's true. That's true. As a community, we're talking about chronic illness, we're talking about autism, we're talking about creating spaces or sharing spaces with self advocates. I hate the word creating spaces, because I'm like, the space belongs to all of us. Who's going to create space for the other, right? It's just weird to say that. But, we're really there where we're saying, let's talk about who has a seat at the table. And I think that's absolutely critical. But next time you see a person leaning on someone, next time you see a person looking really exhausted, next time you see a person saying, I cannot deal with this stage, I don't want to be front facing, please respect that. Because they may be living with an anxiety disorder, they may be living with a mental health condition, they may be just living with chronic fatigue. And one needs to respect that and say, we agree.
So I think the world at large understand, and I don't know whether they do anything about it, but they at least understand the challenges which wheelchair users or people with visual disabilities
they?
face. Kind of.
No.
But for invisible disabilities, I think they don't even know what are the
they
challenges.
don't know.
So how can a common citizen really become more aware about the challenges people with invisible disabilities?
How many minutes is a common citizen spending on Instagram? Lots. They can just follow 2 handles and they'll learn about it. It's just, we also post very interesting reels. We, as in the community of invisible and visible disabilities. So if people just went on, did what they're doing, right, they'll get more information. The problem is that the minute we don't know something and we are uncomfortable, we want to avoid. As a community, as a society, this is really the ingrained nature of society, that we're uncomfortable, so we'll rather not engage, right? And I think that needs to be challenged within each person, but they can just learn about it from everywhere, and really not just from Darshil could paint, so everybody can paint, right? Tare Zami Par Pe, the child could paint, right? Because he was dyslexic and he was really good artist. And how many parents later came and said, oh, you know, our child lives with dyslexia, and now our neighbors all come and say, they must be painting really beautifully, right?
Just like Nidhi must be singing because she's blind, right?
Yeah, I must be singing because I'm blind. Oh, I was told to also. I mean, one of the many advices that I should just sing because I'm blind and I have a nice voice. And I was like, yeah, but I have a nice voice to speak. It's so different from singing.
I've actually never heard you sing.
Sometimes.
Maybe today on camera?
No.
I was just like,
I'm going to drink some other time. I'll sing more freely.
Nidhi also spoke about funders. I've also noticed most funders are not comfortable funding advocacy around disability. I think they really get, I don't know, they get worried or confused. How can we change that?
It's a very interesting question. I think it's a little bit of us walking forward. It's a little bit of them walking forward. It's because when we say advocacy, it feels like we're doing everything anti someone. And what is not popularly understood about advocacy is holding the space, championing for our own spaces, right? I think advocacy has now turned into a term where it's like you are going to fight, you're going to antagonize, and you're going to be anti everybody. And the idea of being anti everybody is what scares the funders or makes them uncomfortable. I think how we also need to understand that it's not about fighting with others, it's about fighting for our space, right? It's about letting me be in a place. It's about letting me travel. It's about letting me access a park as an equal citizen, having my educational opportunities like an equal citizen. When we present it like that, and when we also have these dialogues with funders to say that we are just doing this, if you look at it in this way, this is what we're going to do. We're going to push for change rather than antagonize for change, right? Because change cannot happen. You can't be fighting with someone and saying, now do what I want. It doesn't work like that. You have to collaborate. Everybody has to meet halfway.
I think you put it well. And I think I actually blame the media for this as well, because the media only covers disability when some drastic discrimination happens.
No, but also when there's dharna, right? You tell me a peaceful conversation in a room, right? Which is amazing. Versus if you just have these two things, if Purple Fest only had two things, where there were very meaningful, reflective dialogues, when there was a big protest, dharna, colorful, and what would the media cover?
Of course, dharna, yeah. And I don't think the Purple Fest needs any dharna because I think they're doing a beautiful job.
No, Purple Fest is overall. Okay, that's not what I meant. I am one of the key partners of the Purple Fest. Disclaimer on camera.
No, but what I meant is that dharna overall, I actually disagree with you here.
I'm not saying
it's not necessarily a bad tool.
No.
And I, in fact, feel people with disabilities have stopped learning how to protest. We are either keyboard warriors or we are litigators.
Feel like we have a very singular understanding of protest. You have a singular understanding of protest. We're talking about public place accessibility and how are 200 wheelchair users going to reach there? Why do we have a singular understanding of physical protest? There is digital protest. There are protests in many ways. So I'm not against a physical protest. I'm saying there are protests in many ways. And if you narrow down and focus on one kind of activism, that's what people start believing activism is. They don't see the constructive dialogue side of it. They don't see anything else. They see the sob stories. Like you said, they see the extreme discrimination and they see the tear-jerking moments.
And they don't make,
but they don't make the linkage.
And we come across as militant then,
Yes. We come across as difficult people. It's like, inko to sirf mangna aata hai. I'm like, sure.
Which I completely agree with you. I think that is one perception that we definitely need to change.
Ya to ye bichare hai, ya to ye mangte rehte.
So any message for the disabled community on this?
Just be yourself, come together. For me, a crucial message for the disability community is that please go beyond your disability and come together with everyone. We're one community. We need to be a larger voice because a larger voice has a larger strength and we need that strength for change. And empathy, which we want from others, it's critical that we exhibit that empathy towards other people with disabilities, towards other genders, towards other sexualities, and other marginalizations like caste, class, and other pieces. So, that's one of my messages.
You spoke about creating space, and I know Rising Flame is creating space for a lot of young disabled people through various fellowships, programs, etc. that you've done.
Yes.
I've lost count. Every month I get a new mail about some new program that you're starting. Anything that you would like to highlight here for the viewers amongst the various programs that you're running?
It's tough to choose one. But basically, what we're doing is, I just want to say that Rising Flame has a twofold strategy, Nipun. We believe in, when we talk about building an inclusive society going forward, where everyone is safe and dignified, right? Has equal opportunity and access. That's the larger vision of Rising Flame. We basically said that this vision cannot be achieved if we don't work with two sets of actors. One is directly working with people with disabilities with a focus on women and young people. But the second is also influencing the ecosystem, right? And so our direct leadership, fellowship, programs for women with disabilities, for rural women with disabilities, for young people with disabilities, for scholarships and mentoring opportunities, all of those are on one side of the spectrum of our work. And the other side of the spectrum is all the policy influence work that we do, right? The researches that we publish, the policy influence that we did, and the leadership that we took within G20 of India's presidency, within Asia Pacific at the Beijing Plus 30. So we work with health professionals, we work with policymakers, we work with funders, we work with the media ecosystem, we work with the ecosystem because we want people with disabilities not to be in isolation. And change cannot be achieved from one end. So we want change to come from all spaces and a holistic change. And that's why working with people with disabilities and the ecosystem are both on our target.
You spoke about all the international work that you've done, and if we get into that, I think we'll be sitting here for the next 2 hours. So instead, I'll ask you a simpler question.
Yes.
What do you think is the one thing the Western world can learn from India when it comes to inclusion of people with disabilities, and what do you think is the one thing India can learn from the Western world?
So the Western world can learn from India on how to hold diversity together. We're not just talking about diversity of disability. In India, there's diversity of ethnicity, caste, class, race, so many cultures, and so on and so forth. And in that, we have the diversity of disability. So the way we're holding all of that together, drawing up an act that's so progressive in 2016, really having spaces where we can move the courts, we can move the media, we can do so many things, right? This is something that the world can really learn from India. The world means the disability community of the world that can learn from India. I think what India can learn from the world is how to implement some of this. So I'll just give you a quick short story here. And it's something that really, this was before I founded Rising Flame. And I was a student here in India during my post-graduation. I was responsible for making everything accessible for myself. I was the only blind student there, the infrastructure. I was the ever only blind student in that institute. It was a media institute. They were very nervous. They were like, you cannot do it. The admission started with, you will not be able to do it. What a confidence to have for a student in the class. And I did everything there. And then I was lauded for, not asking for quote unquote extra favors, right? And then I went to LSE to pursue a master's after working for a bit. And I reached there and I was like, okay, I would like to do this. And they were like, why don't you just focus on learning and networking? And I was like, sorry, what? And they were like, what's the reasonable accommodation that you need? We have this infrastructure in place. We have this support in place. We have this technology in place. We have this library facility in place. Now tell us, what else can we do so that you can focus on learning and growth?
Oh.
And for me, it was a moment where I sat down and I was like, okay, I need a day to circle back because I don't know how to do this, right? And for me, that's what we can learn from the world. That we really treat people with disabilities and we understand what equal opportunity means. Equal opportunity means we give that equal time for learning, which means we take away the rest of the pieces around disability accommodation, around disability support. And don't laud people because our structures are inadequate, that our systems are inadequate. And I think that's really critical for us to learn from the global pieces. Yeah.
I don't think I could have answered that. Anybody could have answered that better than what you did. I'm going to ask you one last question that I've been asking everyone.
Oh.
What
I thought you'll have a unique question for me. Sorry.
Everything else was unique so far.
Bolo, yes.
What do you think is the one thing the common citizen of India can do to make India an equal opportunity country for persons with disability?
Oh my God, just shift your mindset. Just shift your mindset. vouch for it that at least 40 to 50% of our problems will be solved if people shifted their mindsets, if they became more open and empathetic and more accepting of disability. The way people with disabilities in our country, whichever, I mean, I'm not saying this proudly, but we even navigate in accessible places when there is people's support. Right? People ask me saying, "What's your access in Mumbai?" I was born and brought up in Mumbai. I'm now living in Delhi, Gurgaon, Delhi NCR.
I don't call Gurgaon Delhi. Yeah.
That's why I said Delhi NCR.
I'm glad you said that.
Because of people like you. But anyway, so people told me, "What's your access in Mumbai?" I was like, "People are my access in Mumbai." Right. And I think that's the power that people have, that they can really make the world inclusive and accessible for all of us if they shift their mindsets, they lead with empathy, and they are compassionate around disability inclusion and accepting of it. I do want to say one last thing before we end, Nipun, that, I some of these thoughts, and I often get asked saying, why was Rising Flame like this? Why are you thinking about it like this? And you mentioned the global work that I did, right? I served as the advisor to UN Women's Executive Director for 5 years, which is based in New York. I've been on philanthropy advisory, so Dutch Ministry's philanthropic project called Voice for 8 years. I've advised them. I've led a global women's rights organization as a board president for about 4 to 5 years. When you look around at all of this, you see that we're not lacking in India. We just need to be more committed, and we just need to translate that commitment into action. And that's what we need to do.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. It's really been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Nipun, for having me. Thank you.